Here we go. Kilted Balls. All right. Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of the Kilted Balls podcast. As you can see, Kilted and I right now are wiping our eyes because we just recorded, I don't know, what do you think, 30 minutes of this episode?
I would bet it was at least half hour.
We probably did a half hour of this episode and realized we never hit record. So I'll tell you this, people. It was a freaking great 30 minutes. It was
an awesome episode.
Yeah, 30 minutes, gone forever. It was the greatest song in the world.
Tribute.
Can't remember the greatest song in the world.
So yeah, I guess we start over.
Oh my gosh. Listeners, I'm so sorry you missed that. It was seriously amazing.
It was super good.
It was super good. We started in our last episode that didn't get recorded talking about Kilted's new haircut.
Yeah.
Give us the side view. Show us the little stripy stripe. He decided to go with something different, going with the bald look. I, on the other hand, like a niece this weekend, was like, you should just let your hair go. And I'm like, I don't know if people will go for that. But then I thought, maybe I will. Maybe I'll see what it looks like. The big issue in my house always has been you can't have long hair because you don't upkeep your hair. Like you don't trim it, you don't do anything, so it looks like a shaggy mess. So maybe this time I'll take care of my hair and it won't be a shaggy mess, and then it'll work. I don't know.
You could just start making those life choices where you turn into a GM, where you just cut your hair once a year, whether it needs it or not, and it just grew out. We all like.
That's what I want to do, but I've been yelled at multiple times about it. And what tends to happen, honestly, is when my hair gets a certain length, I always put it into ponytails, like how your hands are right now. So especially like when I'm coaching, I pull it up and do ponytails, and then it gets annoying, and I stop doing it.
Yeah.
So maybe if I can learn to not get annoyed, it'll be good. And then this is beginning a little fuzzier, but I'm like, you know what? It's not looking too bad, and I'm always perplexed, and I think it looks like this on the video, but like look how dark this is. Like, why is my mustache so much darker than the rest? I don't know.
Yeah.
But then I don't know if it makes me look less fat or
that mustache and then dyed your rest of your hair
to match the mustache.
Yeah, match the mustache.
One of the funniest things that I do every once in a while when it starts getting like this is if I'm in a mood to be creepy, I shave everything but the mustache.
Yeah.
And then I look just like my older brother. And I'll like come out of the bathroom and I'll be like, hey, honey, how about some sugar? And she's like, no. Yeah. She's like, that is sick.
What's it up for?
I know. I'm like, look, I cleaned it up for you. I'm going to leave this mustache on. She's like, no, you aren't. She goes, nope. Though my brother says I'm a fatter version of him, which is probably true. Probably true.
Possibly that's true.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Okay, so we had a question in our earlier recording, and I know this is going to seem random to you, but lady listeners, we're jumping right to the punchline.
Oh, yeah. I forgot we talked about all that,
yes.
too.
So, lady listeners, do you wash your bras every time? Or is it like an every other time or every like 3 times things? Kilted and I were talking, and pants, we don't wash until they're like visibly dirty. Or like there's some observable dirtiness, right?
Or scent.
Yeah, like it could be a scent, it could be a look, it could be a feel, whatever. And with shirts, if we wear undershirts, maybe 2 or 3 times. And then undershirts every time, underwear every 4 times. Because what's the rule?
Front, back, inside out, front, back.
So you get 4. So you can wear your underwear clearly 4 times. But we don't know anything about bras. So like how often do you wash bras? Because there's like boob sweat and stuff, right? Like, do you wash them every time, or do you give them the old sniff test to decide? Because it's probably better for bras to not wash them every time, right?
Yeah, they seem to be a sensitive item.
Right, and they're not cheap, and like you don't want to ruin them and have them lose their stretch or lose their support or whatever.
Yeah.
So, I'm curious.
Yeah. And the reason that came up is because Ballbuster said that I wore this shirt last week, and I could have. Mm-hmm. And I was telling him that I had started doing all the laundry in the house. So
that is what started it.
I took that over. I wasn't excited about how it was being done, and my belief is if you're not doing the job, you can either deal with it or do it yourself if you want it done the way. So plus it helps Gina out a lot, and I'm in charge of all the laundry now.
It's interesting, by the way. I have like the opposite philosophy. Mm-hmm. Kind of opposite, kind of not opposite, where if I'm doing something and somebody bitches, then I don't do it anymore.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's the same idea.
Right.
Like, okay, if you don't like how I'm doing it, you're more than welcome to do it.
I'm like, cool. Like that happened once with the dishwasher. I got yelled at like 3 times. It was like a 3-strike rule. And the third time I got yelled at for how I loaded it, I'm like, I'm good. And someone was like, you're not loading the dishwasher. I'm like, no, I'm not. Mm-hmm. I go, I probably never will again. Now that's wrong. Like at this point in my life, I load the dishwasher. But weirdly, nobody bitches about how I load the dishwasher anymore. So it works out okay.
I imagine the stuff still gets clean.
It does. Right? It does. But I wasn't packing in like 5 days worth of dishes. Like,
yeah.
I was like, okay, I'm going to pack 1 or 2 days worth of dishes and run the dishwasher.
Yeah. Well, that was like when I lived with Jesse. I lived with my good friend Jesse, summer of '96, up in Central. It was awesome. So I worked 2 jobs for the first half of the summer, and then the second half of the summer I worked 0 jobs. So it was awesome. I got to hang out. But we would alternate when you did dishes.
Yeah.
So as soon as dinner was done, I would do all the dishes. Okay, dinner's done, I'm doing the dishes.
Yes.
So he would wait days and days and days and have to stand there forever because we didn't have a dishwasher then.
Right.
And he'd get all mad. He still says, like, I just washed 1 spoon and that was it. That's not true. I would wash a meal, and he knows it.
You'd wash a meal, but was it all on paper plates?
I mean, possibly, but it was still, there was a pan or something that had to be washed.
Like, if it was my time for dishes, I'd be like, we're getting McDonald's. Like, let's go.
Let me throw all this stuff away for you.
Yes. You had something that you brought up in our last 30 minutes because you're like, if you don't have anything to talk about, I want to talk about this. What was that?
I think it was the laundry.
Oh, it could have been the laundry.
It was.
Here's something that we didn't talk about last. Here's a new thing. I learned a game, and it was actually a really fun, amusing game for me.
Awesome.
Yeah. And so you could do this with your family. Kilted listeners, you can do this. I think it's good with friends and family. It wouldn't be good with randoms. Though some people were like, oh, no, it's really good. Like it does team building and stuff. And I can see that. But I don't know if I agree. But it is, you pick one person to be it. Okay? And they close their eyes or whatever. And everybody else picks a number 1 to 10. Okay? So let's say everybody agrees on 3. Okay. Then the person who's it asks each person or every 5 people or whatever, it depends on your group, I guess, a question that they have to rank 1 to 10. So like they might say fast food restaurants. And you'd have to be like, okay, what's a 3 to me or a 3 to you in fast food restaurants, right? Or it'd be like, subs shops. There were a lot of cut of meats. Cut of meats, beef, band instrument. Like it was totally random what people would say, right? But really interesting because then you'd hear what people like ranked stuff, and you'd be like, what? Why are you ranking it there? Or maybe you'd be like, yeah, I'm with you, right? Like, and so it was really kind of an interesting, fun game. And so I highly recommend it to people. Don't know what it's called.
Where did the 3 come in that the people agreed on?
So they all just agree on some number, right? And so
everyone, even the it person knows the number?
No, the it person doesn't. And so after they're done, say we have a group of like 6, right? So they ask the other 5 people their rankings, right? They all answer it. And then they go, ooh, I think the number was and they're trying to guess 3. And you're not trying to trick them. Like, you're just saying what you think of as a 3. And it kind of shows how well you know each other. Right?
Interesting.
Right.
I think I'd have to play it.
Yeah, but it's super fun. Like, the reason it came up is because we were talking about McDonald's. And, like, one of the times going around, one of the nephews was like, okay, buyers, fast food. The number was 2. And they're like, fast food. And I'm like, Hardee's. And they're all like, you didn't think about that. I'm like, I know my fast foods. Like, I know where I rank things. And they're like, who does that? And then, like, later on, they're like, 3. And I'm like, Carl Jr. I'm like, I don't understand. Like, some things are hard. It's one step above Hardee's, right? Mm-hmm. It's one step above, so it had to go above the 2. But, like, and then somebody was like...
So that's the part I missed. So when they asked you the question, when you said Hardee's, because that's your second favorite...
No, that is, like, at the bottom. Don't put Hardee's up near my top. You freaking kidding me?
How would Hardee's pertain to 2?
That's where I rank Hardee's.
You rank Hardee's as a 2.
As a 2.
Oh, 2. Okay, 2 out of 10.
2 out of 10. It's a 2 out of 10.
Okay.
And so if they know me,
where you're ranking it in order of
favorites. So like when it got back to him, he's like, "Ooh," he goes, "You said Hardee's, so it's got to be pretty low." So they're like, "That's pretty a low one." He goes, "I'm guessing like a 3 or 2," and then he's like, "Okay, you said for vegetables like Brussels sprouts," and he's like, "Ugh, I don't know," right? And
so they could ask each person a different question, or they ask everyone fast food?
Normally they ask everybody a different question, right? So I never heard anybody repeat.
Know them,
right?
How well you might know them. That's okay. I get it now.
Right? Yeah. And like sometimes it's like super confusing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I got in trouble because somebody was like subjects in school, and the number was 7, and I was like social studies, and like at the end they're like, "How could you put social studies so high?" And I'm like, "Because it's a tie with the other 5."
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, it's a tie, so there's no like 6, 5, and 4 and 3. Like they're all the same to me. They're not math and they're not science, and those are clearly the top 2. So you got some PE in there, you got some band. I go, and social studies is down with everybody else. They're like, that's not right. That's not right. You know, but like my niece got asked. She asked her Uncle Rick, her dad. But she was like, farm animals. And her number was a 5. And she's like, farm animals. And he's like, tilapia.
Mm-hmm.
And it like she's like, I don't even know what that is. And we're like, it's clearly a 5. He's right. That's a 5.
Yeah.
Like for sure, no doubt that's a 5.
That sounds cool. It sounds like a good party game.
Yeah, it was great. Like around the campfire, we're all doing that. And like, you know, then you're laughing at people. Like if they do something weird, or you know, other times you're like, oh yeah, I know that. Or like my nephew who has a girlfriend, he's like a sophomore, right? So like that 15, 16 range. And I think the number that I had was like a 9, right? And I already had figured it out, so I knew right away from the first person. But I go to him, I'm like, okay, girls in the high school. And he's like, and his dad's like, you don't have to answer that. He's like, Skip, I can't answer that. I'm like, weak. I'm like, okay, boys in the high school. And he's like, no, skip that one too. I'm like, you're making me so annoyed. I'm like, okay, friends with the hottest moms. He's like, this is dumb. You can't ask me these questions. So I was like, ah. Which later on, I got to ask him again. And I was like, girls at the high school. And it was like a whole different group of people. And he said his girlfriend's name right away. Because like I said, I was like, you don't have to answer that. He's like, nope, I'm answering it. It's my girlfriend. I'm like, 10. 10.
Yeah.
I'm like, good idea, buddy. Good safe bet.
stuff away.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was a good game. Highly recommend people with your like family and stuff, right?
Yeah.
So kind of see how they do that. So one of the big topics we talked about and was on our Twitter. So if you follow Kilted Balls on Twitter, the question I asked today was, do you believe in ghosts?
Mm-hmm.
And Kilted asked where the heck that question came from. It's not quite Halloween yet. And that book we've been reading that Kilted has finished and I have not, which is The Singularity is Nearer When We Merge with AI, I started thinking about machines becoming conscious. You know, I'm reading the part where they're saying how you could test to see if they're conscious and what that means. Like, is a dog conscious or is a dog not conscious? Like, do you understand the internal dialogue going through your head?
Yeah.
And is it, if you don't have that, are you really conscious? And if you do have that, does that mean you are conscious? I would argue that if people thought a cow had inner dialogue, they would say then that's not consciousness, and they would come up with a new metric because they want to eat cows.
Yeah.
So I think it's, to humans, it'd be a sliding scale. But so that was the question. And when I started thinking that, and with the conversations last week about could computers be telekinetic, could AI be psychic, could that, I was like, wait a second, if they have consciousness like a human does, could they be ghosts?
Mm-hmm.
Like, once you shut them off, could they be a ghost? And then I started thinking, wait a second, what would be doing the processing? Like, if they're a ghost, something would have to be thinking for them. So what would be doing that? And then I thought, wait a second, you can ask the same question about human ghosts. If you're a human ghost, what the heck is doing your processing because you've killed the brain?
Yeah.
And so, and Kilton said, we started talking about definitions of ghosts, which you were talking about.
Soul.
Energy.
Energy, yep. Yeah, that's the point that I had brought up, is that, you know, what would the definition of ghost be? And I think that at the most basic, that anyone who would agree on ghosts would be that it's some form of energy, because the world is made up of energy anyways. So
it's all energy, right?
It's from somebody else, or it's from, you know, depending on your belief system, is how that would be set up, or just be like something random. I mean, we didn't get to this point, but now is a good chance to bring it up. Like when I was a kid, that house I lived in, we all believed, everyone who lived there, that there were ghosts there.
Right.
Like my brother saw one. I wasn't there. I was older and got on the bus before he did, and he was still at home. He ran out the door, left. I mean, we left everything unlocked anyways, but like left the door wide open, and you know, it was very. And especially being a younger kid and like hearing the stuff that you would hear in that house. Now the house was 100 years old then, and there was no insulation anywhere upstairs, so boards creaked and things like that could happen. But you know, I was overactive imagination as well. There were a lot of times I was like super scared, and especially hearing the adults tell stories. Now, there were a lot of drugs and alcohol in the house growing up. So some of the stories could have come from that, but people talking about like driving by and stopping and like seeing people inside and like beating on the door to come in, and like everyone's asleep or no one's home. Or like there was one story where a door opened, the door closed, and then the door closed for that front porch that we never used. And once there was a story where like a beer on the table was picked up and turned upside down and no one was touching it. So there were a lot of those stories to where, you know, I'm not sure. And we did know that there was someone who had passed in that house. And so I know that one time my mom was talking to the guy's daughter, I think it was. Like they came to look at the house like it had been. I would love to see that house now. The people redid it and stuff.
Yeah.
Like so, but yeah, just things like that. There was enough, you know, beliefs, and in my system of beliefs, or stuff like that could happen.
Yeah.
So it was interesting.
Well, and that's so one of the weird dichotomies. And listeners, if you've been making it all the way to this episode, you know I got a whole bunch of jacked up belief systems,
or
right?
If you're new, welcome.
Welcome, new listeners. Maybe you came from Helping Women, period. I don't know. But I'm pretty. I would say I'm pretty religious. I don't think that's a slide to say that. And I'm a practicing Catholic, and Catholics believe in ghosts. It's like one of the tenets of our faith. And if you're sitting there and you're like, I'm Catholic, we don't believe in ghosts, then you're doing it wrong. Like, you just don't know the rules, right? Like, we pray right? Like, we pray every Sunday. We literally say, I believe in the communion of saints. Like, what the hell do you think that is? They're dead, and they're interacting with you. That's about as classic ghost as you can get. And lots of priests believe in, like, demons and all of that kind of stuff, right? The exorcism. Catholics do exorcisms.
I have a family member.
Yeah. So, like, you've got all of that stuff. But on the same time, like, I'll hear a story like yours, like, yeah, something picked up the beer, turned it upside down, and put it down. And I'm like, okay, so what would it take? What would it take to pick up a beer that's full and turn it upside down and pour it out with nothing touching it? Like, what kind of control or energy or what would have to happen to make that happen, right? And I've thought of things. Okay, so it's not like I haven't thought of things. I've thought of things. But they seem not very easy.
Yes.
Right, so I'm like, okay, maybe at that point a parallel universe was intersecting. And really the beer was picked up and turned over in a parallel universe, but it was bleeding over into our universe. Right? Because there's so many of them that could happen.
In the 80s, there was no such thing as string theory, so we only had sliders.
We only had sliders. Right.
So this I definitely that.
Yeah. And so you're like, okay, maybe that could maybe in today's day and age, we know there's things like the graviton that we're saying could control gravity. So maybe, like, if you became on a molecular level, you could control gravity, right? And do stuff like that. And it's like, okay, like, maybe that would, but you know what I'm saying? They're all like far-fetched rationale.
Yeah.
Like, a ghost did not physically grab that and pick it up and turn it over because the ghost isn't substantial. It would have had to use air, and in order to bring the air that close to grab, the air would have had to have a dramatic shift in temperature, and it would suck all the air from around the room to get it into that spot, and you would have felt... You wouldn't have worried so much about the glass being picked up and turned over as you would about the fact that you couldn't breathe. Right? Like, there had been other shit going on. And so then you're like, okay, could that happen or not? And then you get to things, and you and I talked about this on our hiking trip, like the things in our environment that mess up brain chemistry and observation are huge. There's so much. Like, I tell people all the time. Like, we'll be talking about stuff, and they'll say something like, seeing is believing, or, oh, I didn't see it, so I don't know. And I'm like, seeing is never believing. Seeing, like you were saying, yeah, like, my brother saw a ghost, or this person saw a ghost, and people will ask me, like, what do you see? And I'm like, the problem is I understand that my brain will fill in any gap it can fill. Yeah. So I don't jump to the conclusion that what I'm seeing is a face because my body is made to see faces, right? Like, that's how our brains are programmed. So if, like, I look at a cloud and I see a face, I understand that that's my brain programming, but it's just a freaking cloud. Like, my brain still acknowledges that. So, like, in the middle of the night, this happens to me all the time, right? I'll look up and I'll be like, haha, that looks like a person. And I don't freak out about it because I'm like, it looks like a person because I know my brain is filtering stuff in. Does that make sense?
When it's like a shirt hanging in a weird spot that you're not used to, or just whatever.
Or whatever. Like, it could be a shadow, it could be whatever. But because I I think that way, not that I understand, that's a totally different thing. But that's how I traditionally think. I see stuff like that, I'm like, yeah, nah. Like, yeah, nah. But I'm also cognizant of the fact that, like, when people found witches, when people found vampires, that it all corresponded with a fungus that grew on barley or grew on rye after a wet summer when it all happened, which causes hallucinations, which we all know that. Like, we know mushrooms are psychedelic. Mm-hmm. And it seems like it's probably way more likely that you lived in an old, effed up house with bad insulation, and there was fungus in it, and people were hallucinating shit. Right?
That could be possible.
Like, they're like, oh my gosh, did you see that beer? Yeah, I saw that beer. Like, we're right up and pour it out. And look, it's still fucking there. There's still a beer there. Yeah, because you were imagining that. Like,
you don't think there was any fungus growing in the monkey pee, do you?
I mean, it's hard to say whether there was weird fungus in the monkey pee, right? But I see that happening all the time. Like, I'll watch those ghost shows, right? Like, my wife loves those. She hasn't watched them for a long time, but that's always been her jam. She loves those, and I'll be, like, watching them, and there'll be, like, old school electrical wires running everywhere. And they'll be, like, right here. I always get the creepiest feeling whenever I'm in this room. I'm like, you've got raw, bare wires with tons of electricity running through them, literally creating electromagnetic waves fucking with your brain. Mm-hmm. You know what else is fun? There. Hook up the electrodes on either side of your eyes and you'll see pretty colors too. True story. Mm-hmm. Like, you can do that, people. I wouldn't recommend it because you don't know what the fuck you're doing. So I wouldn't do that. But you can see lots of pretty colors if you do that with the right amounts of electricity. Right? You can do that by holding your breath. Mm-hmm. And I showed my wife a picture. This is like a week ago. It's a black and white picture with horizontal lines drawn through it, okay? And an artist colored the lines different colors. So when you see the image, you're like, that person's wearing a yellow shirt. That person's wearing a red shirt. That person's wearing a blue dress. The picture is literally black and white, but because there's a line there that has blue, your brain fills in the gap and makes the whole thing blue.
Oh, wow.
Because that's what brains do. You aren't, when we talk about AI and stuff, you don't have a fast enough processor. So you have to just fill in the gaps with whatever you think it is.
Mm-hmm. So, because you said this, remember last week I said there was something I wanted to bring up, but and you just brought it up.
Yes! Okay. Yeah, universe!
So, this is awesome. Because I was just thinking, too, there were two great things that happened today that were, like, very, very weird, but this is much more important. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know if this is a click thing, if this is a science thing that I may have missed, or whatever, or just my understanding isn't enough to where what these people are. Okay, so I'm gonna repeat what this I believe was a professor. Okay, let's say it was a professor.
Okay.
What he was saying, and it had to do with some other things that I had seen as well that didn't really make any sense. So it could be me. It's me. Please tell me. I there's some things I don't understand, and I'm fine with that. But so it was talking about light waves. So he showed the spectrum, the Roy G. Biv, and what he was saying is that we don't actually see purple. Our brain makes up purple. That purple, he literally said the color purple does not exist because in the light spectrum, because red and blue make purple, but on the spectrum, purple's not in between the red and blue, that our brain just fills it in. Now, to me, like, that doesn't make any sense because a color palette, like, I guess, yes, we're seeing the light, but you can clearly see purple when you, like, I can look around and see purple, and I don't think my brain is making it up. Am I misunderstanding something, or was this the guy just saying something, like, totally off the wall?
So, it's really interesting. I was just talking about this last week. Like, I thought I was talking about it during our Thursday game night. So,
I don't remember.
So I thought that's when I talked about it. But there's a mild confusion about what you heard him say. So I'm going to guess if he's a science physics person that he said it correctly and you misheard.
Okay.
But it could be that he was listening to somebody else and trying to repeat it. And like we've talked about before, people will say stuff, like Joe Rogan will say stuff and not understand what the hell he's talking about, so it sounds really good because he has just enough knowledge to make it sound good, which is what you were just doing.
The video was him in a classroom.
Yeah. So, if he's the guy who I think you're talking about, he is talking about how there is no purple photon. Not the electromagnetic spectrum, like photons. So remember from your science, there's like a dual nature, right? There's particles, photons, and then there's the electromagnetic spectrum, which is waves.
Mm-hmm.
You with me? And so what he was saying, and that's why I thought I did this during our game night, because I believe I asked our buddy Jamie, who's a physicist, and said, is that true? Is there no purple photons?
It might have been when I wasn't there.
Yeah, it could have been. I thought it was last week or the week before, though. But we'll have to ask him. He'll remember, right?
Yeah.
But it's yeah. So that's what the guy says, is there's no purple photon. And so because there's no purple photon, what you define as purple is not green, because there's green photons, but there's not purple photons. So that's what he's saying, which is different. So
like he said, you can't see purple.
Like, so half the stuff you were saying, like you were mixing up a whole bunch of shit, right? So like when you said red and blue, when you said red and blue make purple, that's color subtraction. That's painting. That's like dealing with paint. That's not dealing with the electromagnetic spectrum.
But he said you can't see purple. He said you can't see the color purple.
You can't see.
So I was mixing those.
You're mixing up all of the different things.
You can clearly see purple.
No, you see something that you call purple.
Okay.
You see something that you're calling purple.
I see what you're saying.
Just like we were talking about, this was literally in the part I just read in the singularity, right? Mm-hmm. What you call red might or might not be what I call red. What you call green may or may not be what I call green. So you're seeing something that you are saying is purple.
Okay.
What he is saying is there's no photon that is a purple photon, which means that what's hitting your eyeball is not the purple photon. So he is saying that is your brain saying that's not green. And so not green is purple. Now, there's a few issues with this. Like, there's more to this story, right? Like, he's leaving a whole bunch of shit out. Because you don't look at something that's black, which is the absence of all photons, and say that's purple. Like, on my screen right now on Discord, I have a purple bar and I have a black bar. Right? So, like, that doesn't make sense. And you're exactly right. The electromagnetic frequency, Roy G. Biv, the I and the V are indigo and violet, right? Exactly. So the electromagnetic spectrum clearly has purple. Mm-hmm. The thing I don't know, and I would have to like look up and research, is there such thing as a purple photon? And is it a photon that is entering your eyeball to hit your cones and receptors? And if it's not, what's hitting it? The red and blue thing is totally different because that's when you're painting and that's color subtraction. When you're dealing with light, you're dealing with color addition.
Okay.
And you don't, right? Like it just works differently, right?
Yeah.
It's like a different thing.
I'm not going to find it. I was just going to say I should find it and send it to you, but it's not that important.
I've seen it.
I was like, that doesn't make any sense.
I've seen it, and he's talking about photons. That's why I was like, I bet it's the same one that's going around, right? Things go around social media like that. So he's talking about photons, not the electromagnetic spectrum, and it's clearly something different, which is like one of the things that I laughed at in the singularity thing is when he's like, we don't know if your red and my red are the same red.
Yeah.
And I'm like, except you're wrong, we do. Right? Like, we know the nanometers of that wavelength, going back to the electromagnetic spectrum. Mm-hmm. So I can show you a red, and instead of calling it red, I call it by its wavelength frequency. Then you and I would just agree that it's that frequency, and we would know all of those different shades based on that frequency. Right? No matter how we interpreted it, we would identify that wavelength as that thing.
Yeah.
And we'd be seeing the same wavelength, and our eyeballs would be doing it. So, like, even him, I was like, you're a little off, guy, but I get what you're saying. Like, I get it, right? So, and I get what this guy is saying, but I don't know. There's more to the story, right? I'm like, there's more to this story. You're leaving shit out. Like, if you're talking about photons, because the black screen is not shooting photons at me. Mm-hmm. And I interpret that as black because there's no photons. So it would have to be some level of intensity that I looked at, right?
That makes sense. So 2 other fun things that happened.
Yes.
I've talked about Jersey Mike's on here.
You have?
About my love of subs.
Mm-hmm.
And Jersey Giants, what you have up there.
We do. It disappeared from DeWitt, but yes.
Oh, did it? Boo. Mm-hmm. So anyways, we walk into Jersey Mike's today. And I had eaten like an hour before that, so I wasn't really that hungry. And I was in the bathroom, and I'm like, well, if Gina orders something, I'm going to order something. So I come out, and Gina ordered something. So I was like, okay, I'm just, because I just love it. So I was in some weird, and I'm like, am I like in some weird like universe? Because I know the sandwich that I order, but when I looked up, it didn't, like the number and the name was not what I was expecting. So I'm standing there like it's the first time I've ever been in this restaurant, like any Jersey Mike's, and it's at least a once a month or twice a month at that location that we stop at. So it was just funny, and I was talking to the guys and stuff. I'm like, that's the sandwich I want, but that name doesn't look familiar, and I don't remember it being a number 13.
And what did they say? Were they like, yeah, we switched the numbers?
They're I'm like, are you sure you didn't change your numbers like within the last few weeks?
Mm-hmm.
But also another thing, so
wait, I got a piggyback. The other day, I'm like at my school, like, you know, walking around, and we have this nice wind turbine that I had built, and there's these trees, like yay big around trees, right? And there's like 2 or 3 of them right by the wind turbine. And I look at a kiddo next to me, I'm like, those weren't there yesterday. And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, somehow I switched universes. Because those fucking trees weren't here, and there's like 2 or 3 big, like those didn't grow overnight, and they're like, well, maybe they planted them. Like the kid was like, maybe they planted them. I'm like, nobody plants 20 or 30 foot tall trees next to a wind turbine. Like they weren't there. I'm like, I just switched universes. I'm like, this is super freaking. I asked my girls, I'm like, are there trees there? And they're like, we actually don't remember. And I'm like, I think I switched universes because
yeah, that's awesome.
I don't think there were trees there. So anyway, same thing, same experience.
Yeah, same idea. Mm-hmm. We're walking. Well, I had to restock Southern Lion today,
mm-hmm.
and then we went. Well, we were looking for something real quick, and we're walking out, and Gina steps on easily. I mean, maybe not a full size, but a baby light bulb. Like picture that sound.
Mm-hmm.
Loud crack. I was in front. I kind of jumped, and she's like, "What was that?" Turns around, nothing, anywhere. Within like 10 feet, easy, like from where she was standing, like there was nothing on the concrete at all. And it was like, I was like, look how fast you just jumped Earths. Like you stepped on whatever that was.
Did she feel herself stepping on it?
She felt herself stepping on it.
Okay.
We both heard her stepping. It sounded like a light bulb. Like if we
or a gunshot. That's why I was like, did she feel herself stepping on it? Or did somebody shoot something?
Yeah. No, she felt it. We both heard it. We both turned around and there was nothing anywhere. It was pretty awesome. I loved it.
That is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't her shoe? Like she didn't get a blowout in her shoe?
At her shoe, there was nothing on the shoe. We're looking at both of the shoes. Like it was clearly 1 foot. but we looked at the other foot. We looked all around, like if it was something that maybe shot out.
Oh,
pinched it.
Yeah.
No, it sounded like something broke. It was pretty sweet.
Oh my goodness!
Just switch that quickly.
To switch universes like Bam Bam.
What Bashar says.
Is that what he says? Boop, boop.
No, he talks about that all the time. Like, you're constantly changing. Like,
it can't be that easy. I'm gonna say Bashar is weird. Like, it can't be that easy, can it?
Why not? Just a thought. Like, how fast are your thoughts working?
It's pretty fast.
You're changing thoughts, and that goes back to the conversation we had where it was infinitely finite. Like, how many are there? Like, I did this instead of that, and I've heard people talk about like all this, like they don't like to think that they're in some sort of like that they have to do stuff, so they'll randomly like throw pencils. But what if they were meant to go pick up the pencil and grab anyways? But like sort of rebelling against being in the same, like doing the same stuff over and over again, like just trying to mix it up to throw.
I wish you're going to have to go look at that picture, because in the book, The Singularity is Near, it keeps coming up right now. That's what the picture was that I was asking about. Like, did you see the pictures? He's like, you can have a set of rules that are like, you have to follow these rules, and within 5 or 6 iterations, you can no longer predict it. Or you could have a set of rules that you can predict it 1,000,000 iterations from now. He goes, so it depends on the rules. Like, it could have rules and be totally random later on, not predictable.
Oh, wow.
And they were showing that, like they showed the pictures. They were like, look at this picture. It followed that rule. If you did the same thing again, this is the picture. Notice how it's a totally different picture. Whereas if you have this rule, it follows the same picture every single time.
Well, think about some of the NFTs that they were doing where they were making all the rules.
Yeah.
Like, however they could come up, and some of those were totally different from each other.
Yeah, like crazy different. So again, that shows that your randomness could be accounted for, or your randomness could be part of the rules that makes everything completely different, right? Like,
when I go to the library this week, I'll have to go look it up and just flip through and look at some of the pictures and stuff. I think that's what I'll have to do, because I'd like to see that.
Oh my gosh, yeah. It was pretty cool. I thought. Those pictures, at least. Like, super confusing. Like, people are like, why is this taking you so long? And I'm like, because, like, that picture, like, I didn't understand. Like, I had to study the picture. And I was like, I'm like, Kilta just gets to fly right by. No picture. No wonder he's moving so fast. I'm, like, trying to analyze the picture.
I would have, too.
And I'm like, in reality, I could have just skipped it and been like, oh, yeah, you've got different rules, cool beans, and moved on. So.
Yeah.
Which is maybe what I should have done. Maybe that's what I should have done. Anyway, any last thoughts for our listeners? We've gone way, way longer, plus the 30-minute episode that didn't get taped.
Okay, I was going to add a little something, but it's not super important, so we'll leave this episode.
We'll leave it? Nothing else to add? Just your brass knuckles and your kitty cat?
This might be my new Tuesday shirt.
It might be. And if people could ever see my shirts, I would set a shirt as well, but I'm always kind of leaning back. But, I've still got the beard going. People might want to be like, arr. My dog always bites my beard. That's a true story.
Oh,
like, whenever it starts getting, like, hairy at all, like, she doesn't, like, lick me. She'll come and be like, arr, and, like, arr, arr, arr. And I'm like, oh my. So, if you're in the mood to, like, bite a beard, apparently my dog likes that too, and, you can nibble on my beard. So.
There you go.
It could be a thing. So.
It's nice of you to offer.
I'm a man for the people. So, anyway, speaking of that, thank you all so much for listening to this long episode of the Kilted Balls podcast. We love having you here, and this is Ballbuster signing off.
That's the Dragon Jerry. Love you all.